Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Frandsen. I'm the program assistant for communications. When I was 6, I was absolutely positive that I was going to be a professional baseball player. I collected obscene amounts of baseball cards. I was a beast in my local t-ball league, and this was enough evidence for me to come to this fairly natural conclusion. By the time my teens started to roll around, though, I came to a somewhat tragic realization. I was probably not the next Derek Jeter. So I settled on a different career goal, becoming a journalist. This was more than some random fallback plan. In fact, I would argue that both nature and nurture teamed up to convince me that this was my true destiny, for real this time. For one, both my parents are journalists and quite literally met in a newsroom. Before them, two of my grandparents worked as reporters in Washington, D.C., covering events like Brown versus Board and the JFK assassination. This meant that journalism was an inescapable, omnipresent part of my childhood. The voices of NPR anchors were like a third parent in the morning. Instead of giving me toys when I was a baby, my mom would hand me a stack of old Washington Post to crinkle and tear up. When I learned how to read, my dad and I would pore over the sports section every morning before school, before heading out the door together. So, by the time I got to high school, I was all in on this dream. I became editor-in-chief of my school paper. I tailored my college search based on journalism programs. I eventually chose to attend Northeastern University up in Boston because of their strong professional connections to the journalism world. After navigating my way through that traditionally rocky freshman year, I secured a 6-month full-time position at the Boston Globe. This should have been an ideal start to a long career in my dream field. But after a few months, I realized that I had miscalculated. I loved talking to smart people every day. I loved writing constantly. And I loved being around the energy of a newsroom. But something still felt off. See, it was right around this time that the world started to feel like it was falling apart a little bit. I remember watching as the 2016 election unfolded in a way that seemed impossible to my admittedly naive 19-year-old brain. The news was dominated with stories of young black men getting killed for nothing more than the color of their skin. Neighborhood residents who lived adjacent to my campus were being pushed out of lifelong homes, victims of a gentrification wave that was touching every corner of the country. Climate change was now more than a warning from Al Gore. It was a real, tangible threat that I and my loved ones would live to witness the effects of. With all this going on in the world, I didn't want to write about the change makers. I wanted to actually be one. So, in that moment, I called an audible. I decided to become an advocate. Now, this transition from journalist to advocate is not quite as stark as it might seem. See, in journalism, I was taught to look for the true story beneath everything. Talk to everyone, get their stories, and stitch them together into one shared narrative that we can all move forward together from. To put it simply, journalism taught me the pursuit of a true and fair universal story. And that is what led me here to FCNL. Because if you think about it, we're doing that very same thing here. We're gathering people of different backgrounds, worldviews, ethnicities, and religions. And we try to find a way to bridge their differences to build a cohesive outlook of compassion, peace, justice, and equality. We try and make everyone see the world for what it is, for what it really is, with all of its problems and flaws and weaknesses. And we set a lofty vision for where we go from here. This is highly idealistic, without a doubt. When certain truths like racial discrimination and economic inequality dominate some people's stories while not even existing in others, it can be hard to imagine a society where we ever see the world from the same perspective. That, at least I think, is part of what made 2016 so traumatic for so many. In one single night, it seemed like we collectively realized the stories we were telling each other were vastly different. Two people could be looking at the very same thing and come away with two entirely different understandings. How can you even conceptualize progress when people have opposite ideas of what progress even means? This disconnect, it can feel like too much sometimes. When the headlines are bad, it can feel like we as a country might never reconcile our worldview into one shared vision. And maybe it is impossible. Maybe years of internalized notions of supremacy, centuries of bad habits have doomed us all. But I don't think so. I do think we can get to a point of mutual understanding one day. A point where we'll all look around and realize that Quite literally, we are on this rock floating through space together. And FCNL provides a pretty good blueprint for doing so. We don't focus our work on winning or partisan emotions. We push policy because it's good policy for everyone. It can create a world that's better for every single person in it, not just the select few at the top. Our message resonates because it's above politics. It's about human decency. If we want to figure out our biggest problems, we need that sense of peace and understanding to define our story. This might not happen in my lifetime. It might not even happen in my kid's lifetime. But I do think it'll happen someday. And that's why I'll be applying my journalism thought process to the world for the rest of my life. I'll talk to different groups, take in facts, and seek out untold narratives so we can work and stitch together a worldview that we can all get behind. It's an ambitious goal, but while I'm not a Quaker myself, I've come to realize in my short few months here that you all are a pretty ambitious group. And social justice is ambitious work. Our stories feel miles apart right now, but that doesn't mean it always has to be that way. Thank you.